Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Writing Cabin with Tarah Benner. I'm fantasy author Tarah Benner, and this is my cabin. We all need to escape into story from time to time. So come on in, sit down by the fire, pour yourself a nice hot cup of coffee, and let's talk books. Now, before we get started today, I wanted to take a quick moment to thank my wonderful patrons. Patrons, your support not only funds the creation of new monthly short stories, but it tells me that you enjoy my books so much that you want to support them and me directly. If you're not familiar with Patreon, Patreon is a platform that allows readers to support authors with a small monthly pledge. If you, dear listener, would like to join our Patreon family, you can do so over at patreon.com/Tarah Benner Labs. I create a brand new piece of writing every single month, as well as an exclusive video diary. And you can gain access to that entire library of Patreon shorts for just $2 a month. Or if you up your pledge to $3 a month, you will get each new release as an ebook before anybody else. Again, that's patreon.com/Tarah Benner Labs. All right. This week's featured book is Colony 1, Book 1 of the Dragonlance Chronicles. Maggie Barnes is at the end of her rope. She's young and broke, living in New York, and her newspaper job has been taken over by robots. When she pisses off a playboy tech billionaire, she's mysteriously offered a position aboard the first civilian space colony. Maggie thinks it's her lucky break, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. For Jonah Wyatt, the Space Force is his last shot at a military career. After years of tracking down members of a deadly cyber terrorism ring, he was discharged from the Army and stuck working one demeaning job after another. Now this disgraced combat specialist is headed to space. At first glance, Alderaan seems to be a futuristic utopia. Bots do the laundry, meat comes from a lab, and the latest technology expands the scope of human capability. But as Maggie digs deeper, she realizes that Alderaan is not at all what it seems. When she receives a tip from an unknown source, she'll go undercover and learn a truth that could put her life in jeopardy. Colony 1 is the first book in my near future sci-fi AI thriller. It's kind of a cross-genre book, but it's a lot of fun. If you enjoyed my series, The Fringe, I really think you will like Alderaan. It's a dual perspective book. The two main characters have kind of an antagonistic relationship in the beginning. There is conspiracy underlying it all. And right now, book 1 is free. And so you can pick it up, give it a try at no cost. I will put a link to that down in the show notes. All right, it's time for my little life update that I do each and every week. And the biggest theme of the week this week is that where I live, this is the animals' world. We are just like squatting in it. So in addition to the budworm epidemic that my husband has been fighting very gallantly in our forest, this week we had our very first bear sighting. And I will say that on the same day that this happened, I was driving myself to the dentist and I'm leaving our property, going down our driveway, and I see this doe with two little fawns with their cute little spots on, and they're just hopping along, frolicking through the forest. And on this same day, my husband was doing some tree work down on the north side of our property with a friend of ours and our dog Nelson, and they saw a black bear. And I knew that we had bears. I'd heard that we had bears where we live. I'd seen some bears scat, but I had never actually seen a bear. And he came back and he was freaking out. Not freaking out, but he was like kind of breathless as he tells me that our dog Nelson, who's half Malamute, saw it and started barking his really aggressive, low bark. And my husband grabs him and keeps him from running after the bear. But he said if this bear stood on his hind legs, he would be as tall as my husband. And I did a little bit of research because the bear was brown. And I said, well, is it a grizzly bear? Because those are like the worst kind of bears. And I don't think we even have those here. And so according to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Association, black bears are the only bears known to exist in the state. And males can average 275 pounds, females average 175 pounds. And a single black bear may have a range from 10 to 250 square miles. So even if we don't have a bear who lives in our immediate vicinity, we could be getting bears from like all over the state, I guess. And bears are most active during the early morning and late evening hours in the spring and summer. Mating takes place in July. So I guess next month, if the forest is rockin', don't come a knockin'. But what was really great is my husband was kind enough to read me this headline from the Denver Post. Bears attack and kill Colorado woman. Wildlife officials confirm human remains found in animals' stomachs. So that was really great because I hike on our land almost every day with my son in his little baby backpack. And so now I'm kind of altering the route that I take. Even though we usually hike in the afternoon, I'm not incredibly worried about it because bears are not typically as active during that time. But it's just a little bit scary because I hike with my baby and my two dogs, and I don't actually worry about really getting mauled by the bear because bear attacks on humans are fleetingly rare. I think that headline that I read that took place last year, about this time last year, and the most recent bear attack that I'm aware of was in 2019, or I should say, I think that was the latest bear fatality that was reported. So I'm not really worried about that, but I'm most worried about my dogs because Nelson, my Malamute, is very protective, and he's also very smart, very street smart, I should say. And so I don't know that he would actually chase after the bear. I think he would go toward the bear and then find a perch to like bark and growl at the bear rather than, really try to run it down. But my little Aussie, she is stupidly brave. She's very intelligent, but not really street smart. And so I worry about one of them running up on the bear and the bear going to defend itself and getting one of my dogs. And so, that's kind of a concern right now. But it is where we live. We have lots of wildlife. We are cohabitating with all the animals, which, to be fair, we're here first. So that was the big news of my week. As far as a writing update goes, I have lots of exciting news. So the paperback of the Fringe collection is now available. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm showing it right now. It is a very thick book. I was really excited to get it in the mail because this is the biggest book of mine that I've ever received. And it includes books 1 through 3 of the Fringe in one beautiful paperback with a brand new cover designed by Molly Phipps at We Got You Covered Book Design. I'm holding up the proof copy, so if you're wondering what this gray band is, that's Amazon's way of telling everybody that this is not an official copy. It's just the proof that you received to make sure everything looks good. I have not gotten any true paperbacks ordered yet for myself, but I think I will because I'm planning on doing a little bit of giveaway just to celebrate it, because the Fringe's anniversary actually will be coming up in October. And so I'm trying to think if it was 2014. Yeah, it was October of 2014. And so that would make the Fringe 6, 7, 8 years old in October, book 1. That's crazy. But people still love it. And so I have had this new edition made. There's nothing different about the text of the book. It's just a pretty new cover and a paperback of the collection, which I've never had before. So that was exciting. I also have been brainstorming some new ways to get more audio and video fiction to you guys. I have already recorded my own reading of the novella Blood Ties, and I've been kind of debating whether I wanted to make an entirely different podcast for my fiction. And I have kind of decided against that because I don't know that there's a huge market for it. But I am going to be putting more of my audio fiction on YouTube. The audiobook recording of Ether Witch that's available on YouTube has done very well. And so I think I will put my own reading of the prequel novella Blood Ties on YouTube. I had started recording The Witch's Fortune, but I want to experiment a little bit with Google's new AI narration. And so I think I am going to look at that, see I've heard a sample of the Google AI doing fiction audio narration, and the sample that I heard was very good. And so I want to see how it does with The Witch's Fortune, because that would save me from having to record it, and I could release that a lot sooner on YouTube. And I think I might be doing those episodes, at least the ones that I read, the stories, I might be releasing those on this podcast as special episodes rather than starting an entirely new podcast, because there's just a lot involved in that. And I kind of started making the cover art for that, and I've been shopping for some music for the intro. And then I was like, I just don't know if this is going to be worth the time and effort to create a whole new podcast, especially when I already have this one. So we'll see, but I'm really excited to try out the AI narration. Of course, for my the audiobooks of my main series, I will still be using human narrators because I just think that there's no substitution for the human voice. And those are also kind of what I consider premium products, whereas an AI narrated audiobook, I would be giving away for free or pricing it very low because I don't have to pay a human to produce those. And it's just a very different experience having an AI narrate a book. And some people may not like it, but I think that there are a lot of people who would just like to have everything in audio, even if that audio is not necessarily human generated. So I'll give it a try. If it's really flat and not good, then I won't release it. I'll just continue to read everything myself. But the recording process is very time consuming, and I'm a mom. I don't have unlimited time. My time is diamonds, which is a new time is diamonds is a new quote that I heard on one of my mom podcasts. And I was like, yes, that's so true. My time is my most valuable asset right now. So anyway, that's kind of what's going on with audio and video. As far as new writing goes, I just finished the first draft of my latest work in progress, and that is going to be Dragon Kingdom Book 1. That is the series title. I posted it on Facebook, and so now it's just kind of out there that is what the series is called. I still have not given a title to the first novel yet. That draft came in at 103,000 words, which is, I think, the longest first draft that I've produced. And it will probably grow in edits quite a bit. It may end up being 115,000 words or so. I'm not sure yet, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. It was so much fun to write. I guess I'll see really how it turned out when I go to edit it next week. I'm letting that draft sit and marinate for a week. And in the meantime, I have started a novella for my patrons. This novella is going to be a prequel to the main series that I'm working on right now. And the working title for that is The Silver Flame Dragon. And it has four of the characters from book 1. In this one, the main male protagonist and his band of misfits. And I'm about 7,000 words into that. I'm supposed to be finishing the first half of it today, and I'm a little bit nervous because my new my new content goes out to patrons on the 1st, and I have 2 of the 3 chapters that I meant to write written. I'm working on the 3rd chapter. I'm most of the way done with it, but I also have to edit those chapters before tomorrow. So we'll see. It may end up being that those go out to my patrons tomorrow afternoon. Well, Friday. If you're listening to this podcast on the day it comes out, it may end up going out later this afternoon. But I'm kind of under the wire on it because writing a novella takes time. And I didn't, even though I finished the first draft of the novel a day early, it still apparently was not enough time to get this novella off the ground. But regardless, by the weekend, patrons, there will be part 1 of the novella for you to read. So I think the reason it took so long was because I've been doing some pretty ridiculous research as I write, because in the process of writing book 1 and the novella, I'm building out this whole new world. And I realized that I have to know more about these side characters that I've created for the novella, since they're more of a focus in the novella. And so just some of the helpful resources from my research were Cooking with Herman Melville, Do People Really Eat Whale? That was one article from the Paris Review that helped me. PirateGlossary.com, super helpful because the lion's share of this novella takes place down at a port in the kingdom, and I realized I know nothing about maritime anything, about ships or ports, nothing. I don't know anything about it. So PirateGlossary.com has been very helpful. I certainly know more now than I did when I started. And then I think this article is from The Guardian. From Cliff to City, Unruly Goals Put Humans in Firing Line. I did have to put some goals in the novella, but really that was part of my research to help me have a jumping off point for the behavior of one particular species of dragon that's been kind of hard to get rid of for the characters. So yeah, I've been doing some pretty crazy research as I write, because not only am I dealing with the immediate kind of kingdom that they live in, but I am having to think of the cultures that each of these side characters has. So one of them is a dwarf, and he's specifically from one tribe of dwarves. And so kind of what they do, their attitudes, their kind of little quirks that they have as a whole, and specifically this character, what are his little quirks, and how does he speak and how does he think of things. And the other character is a quarter giant. And in my world, the giants have been kind of persecuted and used as slaves in the history of the kingdom. And they are from this island that has been colonized. And so that island very much has its own culture, its own kind of economy that they rely on, and how their economy is impacted by the larger continent where the humans live. And so that's why I've been doing some kind of ridiculous research, because, their main industry is fishing. And so to know more about kind of sea creatures and kind of fantasy iterations of specific animals and kind of what that would look like, what they eat. This particular character, the quarter giant, he's a great chef and a baker. And so I've been looking up different fancy desserts. So very productive writing sessions when I spend half an hour looking up fancy desserts and saving recipes. So, but it's part of my process. I need all that input to kind of make my world rich, because one of my little quirks as a writer I've noticed is I always have to describe what people are eating. Like the food to me is very much a part of the setting, like the smells, the taste, what it looks like, and it has to fit the culture of those people and their kind of station in life and their lifestyle. And so that to me, until I get that figured out, it's really, I can't fully write a scene. The other thing is, what does everything look like? Because the area that I was working in for the novella, it's geographically very different from the novel because it's the coast. It's this rocky seaside coast with cliffs and things like that. And so, what type of housing would we have there? And what would a giant's house look like, especially coming from this whole other island where, what do their houses look like? Because he would want his house to feel kind of like he remembers his homeland. And so all that to say that there's a lot that goes into building an entirely, fictional fantasy world. And that's one thing that I didn't really budget for time-wise when I was deciding I was going to switch genres and write this high fantasy series. I really did not consider how much more time it would take to do the world building because, I've written dystopian post-apocalyptic stuff before, and that is time consuming in its own right because you have to do research, but it's research with an end because you have to find out, is this realistic, this thing that I want to do? If not, how could I borrow from existing science to make it work? Everything can be kind of extrapolated from real life research. Whereas when it's an entirely new fantasy world, you have to make things up as you go, and anything is possible, which makes it a little bit more daunting. And it's like, well, which animals are going to be real animals, which animals are going to be fictional animals. So it just takes a lot more time than I counted on. Oh, but the little extra silver lining, the nugget of information that I found, I don't know if you're a child of the 90s, you might remember there were these kind of as seen on TV things called Precious Pearl, where it was a kit that you got, and inside the kit was an oyster, and you would crack the oyster open to find a pearl of different colors, and then you put the pearl in a necklace. And they have a new version of that. I was very excited to learn, but I found a Precious Pearl on eBay, like the original from the 90s. And I remember as a kid, we would go to Kay's Merchandise, it was this big department store, and they had this video playing on a loop that showed people like opening the oysters and getting the pearls out. And I wanted one of these so bad. I might end up buying it to satisfy my inner child, even though it looks really cheap and junky now, as opposed to the like elegant, expensive thing that it looked like when I was gazing at it in the department store as a kid. I don't know. Now I think the version that they sell on Amazon, I think it's called the Love Pearl. Those are, I think, pearls that have been cultured, dyed, and then reinserted in an oyster, and the oyster like factory sealed. Whereas I think the original Precious Pearl was still a cultured pearl, but I don't think anyone had actually opened the oyster. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, I think that the Amazon knockoff might not be as cool, but it does come with different necklaces. So if anybody is a child of the 90s and remembers Precious Pearl, let me know, or maybe it's just me. But that's it for my rambling writing update. Now it's time for what am I reading this week? And this week I am reading on my Kindle Dragons of Autumn Twilight by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. I don't even remember how I stumbled upon this series, but I'm really enjoying it so far. It's everything I love in high fantasy. It's got dwarves and goblins and elves and a quest. There's even a hint of a little bit of romance, which I need a little dash of romance in my fantasy. So I'm really liking that. As far as audiobooks go, I finished Dragonflight by Anne McCaffrey as I have been continuing my journey through Pern. And I had mentioned that the audiobook was not great. And the reason it wasn't great was two reasons. One, it was recorded probably in the 70s or 80s, so the quality was really bad. But also, I was like, man, I know this is her like the first book in the series, but this is just not very good. It feels jumpy. The characters feel really poorly developed. I'm not sure how we got from point A to point B. Come to find out, I was listening to the abridged version of the audiobook, which I'm kind of enraged that abridged versions of audiobooks even exist in the first place, because it's not the book. It's like the Cliff's Notes version of a book. And it was terrible. It was not like a good story, really. It was not a good abridgment. And I'm extra annoyed because now I feel like I have to go back and listen to the unabridged version, which I probably won't do because I'm a busy person. I don't have time to reread a book that I already kind of read or listened to. And but then I was thinking, if it was recorded in the 70s or 80s, this would make sense because it was probably a lot more costly to produce an audiobook because you're recording on tapes or maybe something else in the 70s and 80s. I know there were 8 tracks, maybe it was an 8-track. I can't imagine they were recording it on vinyl. That seems ridiculous for an audiobook. Surely they didn't have vinyl audiobooks. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm a millennial. I'm sorry. But, it would be really expensive to record a 10 plus hour audiobook if you're working on tapes because, not just the physical media that have to be created, but the editing process would be insane. And so I can give them a little bit of slack on it being abridged, but in the future, I'm definitely going to check on that. Make sure I'm reading the unabridged version of an audiobook. Now that I'm done with Dragonflight, I have started listening to Dragonsinger, which is unabridged and it's wonderful. I love the narrator. So if you've had this happen, I'm sorry if you stumbled upon the abridged version of Dragonflight and you didn't enjoy it. That's probably why. But that's about all I have for you this week. But before we go, let's check the mailbox. And this week we have a question from Megan. Megan writes, I'm a fan of your dystopian books, and I'm also an aspiring writer working on my first novel. It seems like you write books very quickly, and I'm wondering how you write so fast. It's been slow going for me so far. Any tips would be appreciated. Thank you so much for sending in that question, Megan, and congratulations on starting your first novel. And I will say, as far as my writing speed goes, I am faster than some, but not as fast as others. And the speed that I have now, it's definitely something that has come with time and practice. So for reference, if you're a writer, on a good writing day, I can write like 6,000 words. And I don't know that I could do more than that if I didn't have a 10-month-old, because I find that I only have really so much creative juice in any one day. And I'm still doing the majority of my drafting by hand. By hand, I mean the keyboard. I don't mean like writing longhand. But when I first started out, I had days where I get 200 or 300 words, and a good day was like 1,000 words. And of course, that depends on how much time you have to write. But the first novel you write is always going to be slow, just because you're not used to drafting. You don't have this intuitive grasp of story. And, speed is just one of those things that comes with time. So as far as tips go for improving your writing output, the biggest thing is plotting. There's kind of a big divide in the author community between plotting versus pantsing, also known as discovery writing. So pantsing, the term, some people really hate that term, but it comes from the idea of writing by the seat of your pants. But people who call it discovery writing say, writing is a very intuitive process for me, and I just have to let the story come as it comes. Whichever camp you fall in, I can say that you will almost certainly be faster if you create even a very loose outline. I am very much a plotter, and so I do a really detailed outline for every book that I start. That doesn't mean that I never deviate from the outline, because I do, but the more I have written in my outline for each chapter, the faster that chapter goes. And so I will write at least usually a paragraph for each chapter in my outline. sometimes more. If I have ideas for dialogue, I'll write out some dialogue and then I'll move on. But I can spend like 6 days drafting an outline for a book sometimes. The other thing that really helps me is thinking through the scene the night before. I try to do this in the shower because I get a lot of good ideas in the shower, but just kind of walking through the scene in my head, letting it play out like a movie, trying to think through any things that I'm kind of stuck on. That really helps. And if I have a bunch of great ideas, I'll jot a note to myself that I can see in the morning when I go to write. You also need to know what time of day you are the most productive. For me, that is in the mid-morning, but I always try to get as much writing in the morning done as I can because that just takes the weight off me for the rest of the day. Setting word count goals is really helpful. When I first started, my goal was to write 1,000 words a day, and I gradually increased that as I had more time to write, going full time, and as I just got faster and I was meeting those goals more easily. Get an ergonomic keyboard. I know a lot of writers crank out novels on their laptop. I used to do that too. I used to just write on my laptop with a laptop keyboard, but I developed some pretty serious carpal tunnel. So now I have an ergonomic setup at my desk. I have an ergonomic keyboard, an ergonomic mouse. I have a riser for my laptop. And the ergonomic keyboard genuinely helps me type faster. Finally, dictation is a really big one that helps people write faster. I have tried to learn dictation in the past and abandoned the process several times. I am now attempting it again because so many people swear by it. And people who poo-poo dictation will often say, I just can't write like that. I'm faster if I type. And that's true, but I don't know if they still teach typing class in elementary school, but when I was like in 6th grade, we had to go take a typing class where you'd sit at a computer and go through exercises to learn how to type. And, if you're older than me, you probably learned on a typewriter. And at first, as a kid, you're like, well, I can type faster with 2 fingers. Yes, because you haven't learned the skill of typing properly. Once you learn the skill of typing properly, of course, you can type faster with all of your fingers. Dictation is much the same. At first, it will be slower than typing, but then as you get better at it, you can definitely produce more words in a shorter time frame. And the main reason I'm using dictation right now, or trying to use dictation, is that sometimes my writing time is cut short because my son will wake up early or will have, not a very good nap. And I can sit in his playroom for like 10 minutes and get, 600 words. And they still need to be cleaned up. They're not perfect. All the fantasy names are wrong. Like they're always wrong, spelled wrong. But it still helps me get my ideas down on the page. Dragon is really popular software if you have a PC. I believe they have stopped servicing Dragon for Mac, and so I've never used Dragon for Mac. But Google has voice to speech on Google Docs, which is free. That's pretty good. What I have found that's even better is an app called Otter AI. I've only been using it for about a week, so I'm still in the testing phase, but it's free up to 600 minutes a month, I believe. And so far, the accuracy is probably the best that I found. So those are just some tips. If you're a writer, I hope that helped. Megan, thanks again for sending in your question. Best of luck on your novel. If you listeners have any burning questions or comments that you'd like for me to answer on the show, you can send them to tarahbenner@gmail.com, or you can post them on any of my social media channels. I am at author Tarah Benner almost everywhere, but I am Tarah Benner Author on YouTube. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe. I am so close to having 600 subscribers on my YouTube channel. I would love to get over that mark. That's all I have for you this week, but feel free to stay in my cabin for as long as you like. We can drink all the coffee. You can crack open a good book, hopefully one of mine, and have a wonderful weekend.